Hi, and welcome to our webinar on how to create an automate-first culture. Today, I'll chat to Marcus Wildsmith, my co-founder, but first let me introduce myself and Cutover a little bit before giving Marcus the opportunity to do exactly the same thing. So I'm Nichol, I'm the CEO of Cutover, and what does Cutover do? So Cutover is a work orchestration observability platform, and at Cutover we primarily became frustrated that the world of human and machine collaboration at pace felt like it was sort of at day -5 and a paradigm behind many other areas. And we're keen to move this forward at pace to a far better and collaborative way of working across human and machine activities in some of our most critical work. And primarily, we've been focused on helping financial institutions to deliver technology change faster and safer, to move quickly with confidence, whilst at the same time recovering if any services do go down in a seamless and very well orchestrated manner across a variety of infrastructure types, estates, applications, and tool sets to interoperably play in this area. And so it's been a really exciting journey from our perspective, where automation has certainly been at our hearts. So that's a brief introduction of myself and Cutover, and I'll hand over to Marcus Wildsmith, our co-founder, to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kai. So as Kai says, Marcus Wildsmith, I'm co-founder of Cutover with Kai, and Chief Product Officer. Before that, I had around 15 years experience in generally large program consulting with big multinationals. And so as part of that, there was always a big challenge around how to drive automation into various programs. And since then with Cutover, I've had a real mixture of observing some of those challenges with our customers, but also as we grow our product and engineering function, looking in ourselves as well around how we make the most of automation and how we drive that as part of our culture in the business.
Thanks, Marcus. That's great. I thought I'd start to get a perspective on how you think automation first culture is shaping our product strategy.
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, when we get together as a team and look around at our customers, it's really clear that well executed automation is really critical, and delivers a lot of business benefits when it comes to a number of areas. So kind of productivity within an organization, consistency, how you look at continuous delivery of manual and repetitive tasks, and in particular how you reduce the error rate in those sorts of situations. And the idea of intertwining those automated activities, where you're looking at multiple different sources, made a huge amount of sense to us and became an increasing amount of focus for the business. We've also seen that there's real big difference between driving automation in isolation in terms of optimizing in a very specific area, and then also how you do that across the various tools in your business in order to unite that, and come up with an automate first culture in the business that spans multiple areas of the business and multiple tools. But I think the exciting bit has really been how this has been consistently led by our clients for us. We've done a lot of work with our clients to capture the manual steps that have been in the processes that we've been interactive with. So it's very typically been operational resilience activities, so things like failing an application over or failing a data center over, but also release activities. So releasing a large IT change to a system, a big payment system maybe, as an example. And I think we've seen in both of those use cases a massive increase in demand around how do you drive that into an automate first approach, rather than relying on manual activities and people to go away and maybe automate in isolation, but not to do it holistically. And so that's really led us to a real solid belief that if you want to enable your teams to go and do things in a bigger, better way, thinking about how you orchestrate and automate across both manual and automated activities is a really key way forward.
Yeah, I think those are all excellent points, Marcus. And I think back to a key takeaway that I have from the space industry, which is really what I call sort of the astronaut model, which is you'd never sort of strap yourself into a rocket and manually attempt to fly yourself to a very precise near Earth orbit. That would just go horrendously wrong. Sort of the rocketry and rocket flight was automation first from the very first day, and astronauts on board there are really catching the unintended consequences of complex engineered systems. And from your perspective, the parallel of that in what you're seeing, our product strategy, and the great engagements you have with many CIOs, CTOs in some of the world's largest financial institutions. How are you seeing that then within this culture? What is the position of the human?
Yeah, I think it's I think we absolutely understand that there's a whole kind of raft of areas where it isn't just about the automation; it's about doing it in the right kind of level of context. And so I think there's fundamentally kind of 5 areas that we see as a massive benefit to taking the right approach of getting the blend right between automation kind of at a optimized at a local level, and then having a more automation strategy overall and thinking about that. A big part of that is about how do you leverage your existing tools. So automation is not new. It's been around for a long time, whether that's kind of automation at a very technical level in terms of scripting, kind of through to implementing some automation tools that we definitely see in some of our clients, and many of them have been around for a very long time. So a big part of it is you want to bring that capability to the surface and leverage the existing tools that you've already got. I think a second bit is understanding how do you prioritize and optimize where do you go and automate. It's very easy to pick something because it's low hanging fruit and it's easy to technically do, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to there being value there or it being the right thing to do. So I think a big part of the human in that equation is understanding the data and making the right decisions about where to go and automate. I think a third bit is around there's a need to involve the business in a lot of decisions. I think just by nature, automation has often grown up in the technology side of the business, and so therefore, kind of those parts of automation are often hidden from the business, and so surfacing that in a digestible way, kind of through a kind of UI that resonates with the business, is business friendly and accessible, can really help leverage those existing workflows. And that's been a big part of what we've been looking at. And then I think there's some really interesting kind of changes that have come along with the advent of kind of DevOps and cloud, and the real drive to adopt those at mass scale. That's hugely come through in the last few years in big organizations that are really embracing that approach. But what we definitely see, and even in pretty tech first businesses, is that actually there are often 2 speeds of process, and you need a clutch between those. So we often kind of deep dive into kind of what a process is for getting a release out the door. And it is for CI/CD, for dev, test, and UAT. But actually, we kind of often get the response that it's not quite like that for production, because there needs to be more scrutiny. You may need to communicate with other bits of the org to let them know that it's happening, whether that be marketing or support, and you need to involve others. So I think there's a real role for finding the right ways to step out of a process and involve people when you need to, but not bother when you don't. And then I think there's an overarching piece, which is just about how do you provide the right level of transparency and control. So it doesn't really matter what the underlying automation and technology is. Generally there is an end-to-end process that people want to understand how are things going. And actually, you often care about consistency regardless of the underlying technology. A good example might be kind of you're migrating to various cloud platforms. You don't much care whether it's AWS, GDP, or Azure, but actually what you want to know is how are the migrations going regardless of those underlying platforms. So there's definitely a real desire to say, well, how do I have that standardization to be able to see that regardless of what sits beneath it?
I think they are great benefits of a sort of orchestrator approach that you set out there, Marcus. And it makes me think that also that there's a degree of risk in automation. I think back to things like the scene of Sorcerer's Apprentice in Disney Fantasia, where sort of the brooms are going wild, and you think that there's a pretty simple system for just automating sort of cleaning up this area, but it went horribly wrong. And I think we've all heard of unfortunate circumstances where automation is really been a force multiplier, and if not applied in the right direction with the right control, etc., then it is a big risk at the same time. What do you think are good considerations for an automate first culture to think about risk and handling the sort of force multiplier that automation is?
I think some of it's around putting the right constraints around what automation is available to who, and to be able to kind of take things that are proven and to be safe and make those available with a lower threshold, and kind of put a far higher threshold on things where kind of where you perceive there needs to be kind of far more scrutiny, and it needs to have a I suppose an advanced driver kind of in charge of that, and somebody who knows that they need to monitor it and check that it's on course. I think we've where things go wrong, and you kind of, as you say, the unintended consequences kind of tends to be an automation is available and it isn't perceived that it could be risky, but without a doubt there are people in the organization that know that it was risky or could be risky, and it's around how do you differentiate that information between between the different teams to make sure that it's that you're not overreaching in the kind of efforts to strive to be faster and more efficient. You're not putting yourself at risk.
Yeah, and I think it reminds me that what we create in software is not, if not the most complex sort of endeavors you see humans sort of attempt. I think the discontinuous systems is not like building a car where if it goes around a corner well at 50 miles an hour, and it goes around a corner well at 60 miles an hour, the same corner, you can interpret that at 55 it would be all right. These systems are discontinuous, and you can't say that with software. And it feels often there's a degree of tribal knowledge around some of these systems for how they behave, and that can be the most advanced cloud microservices set up all the way back to some things on a mainframe. But do you think there's also an important point in how we codify that tribal knowledge and get it into structured data and sort of out of people's heads to sort of help with managing that risk?
I think there's a big bit around that, right? So that you're not just automating blindly, but you're also giving enough visibility of what's going on behind the scenes that it's understandable, and somebody can dig into it and understand where it's failed. I think the point around kind of being able to retain that knowledge, and part of that is documenting it, and part of it is you always need to be comfortable that there are some people kind of in the depths of it that really can go and debug it and understand what's wrong. And I think it's getting the right balance between codifying those processes and making them digestible and visible to whoever wants to see them, but also understanding kind of what's the backup plan, because things do go wrong, right? And you can't get to that point where nobody really understands it and you haven't got a fallback mechanism to go and delve into the detail and figure out what's wrong.
Great points. It brings me also to the thought that I don't know, we're often talking here where it feels like it's a technology-led process, but like you said earlier, that the visibility across the business for some of these things is vital. And it reminds me of, it felt like kind of 2015, 2016, there was a large move to hey, we could make dev move really quickly, 400 releases a day, and the CIO might be quite happy, and a few more about that, about optimizing infra and costs and those sorts of things. But it was very difficult for the business to sort of understand, integrate with that, because it was like a Formula One engine, as we talked about earlier, in perhaps a sort of an average sedan chassis, which didn't work out so well. And it feels like that there's now a bit of movement towards, hey, I need to make sure, a bit like an effective sort of manufacturing line, start to finish, that sort of the business can cope with the pace as well as development, and you get the right business outcomes. And I think there's some of that in your sort of clutch and two-speed processes analogies and visibility. But I don't know if there's anything you want to dig into there, but I think that's been quite an interesting transition as organizations we've all learned collectively.
Yeah, I think that's it's been interesting, and I know that kind of we ourselves and the way we look at that are kind of representative of some of what our customers find, which is we have a cloud platform that we deploy to multiple customers, and we do that for very good reason in an isolated way, because that goes well from an InfoSec perspective and a resilience perspective. But actually that's something that needs to be very carefully managed to understand, which version of a release different clients are on. How do you manage that communication with them? How do you make sure that's absolutely visible to any support teams if they kind of have an interaction with a customer? You've got to know what the context of how you're answering a question. And actually that's quite similar to a couple of clients of ours as well, right? So it's the same problem, that as soon as you're in a complex environment, whether that's us with a core platform that's used by multiple clients, or whether it's an organization that's running a portfolio of different very different systems, which you kind of obviously find within a financial services organization, you've got to have a good way to get the data out in order to be able to make good decisions. And the automation's fantastic, but you've got to kind of put those points out along the way to indicate to people who need to consume it, kind of what's happened, what's the latest status of this activity. It's kind of providing that insight to others so that they can come in and diagnose if things haven't gone well, but also just inform them so that they can engage effectively. And that may be as much as a marketing team, right? Knowing that a release has gone out and you want to communicate it, or a customer communications team that knows that they need to coordinate some customer comms with a release. It's like making that type of thing just incredibly transparent and seamless, that you kind of get away from what could have been a whole bunch of instant messages, a lot of emails, back and forth. I think automation done well with that transparency can take away a lot of the noise that people would normally see kind of dealt with kind of office type tools.
I think that's exactly right. It takes me back to that sort of force multiplier stuff, and how you think about the right tools, because I think we ourselves and others have been in the space of where you saw that need, but often would be thinking about, oh, well, I've got this particular automation tool or that one, and I may, can I try and bend that out of shape in some way to sort of fulfill all these different needs, when actually there's these best-in-class point solutions that are very good for exactly what they do, and to involve them appropriately within the process, rather than trying to sort of deduce or induce from one tool within the flow to bend it out of shape, to do things it shouldn't do. And I think as you add the color to that of sort of saying, well, at the end of this, could you update HubSpot, Marketo, the Gainsight client success platforms, as well as the codes there and with clients, it just shows a very complex system. But I wonder if you had some thoughts on that tendency of sort of people to bend tools out of shape.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly common, right? You've got a tool, you've invested in it, not just in in terms of paying for it, but also in terms of you've got skills to do it. And therefore, if you're going to task those people with finding an answer, they're going to reach first to the thing that they know. And so there's hugely common examples of where you bend something out of shape to try and do a job that you need doing. And I actually think there's some real merit to that, in terms of it's a great way to sort of prototype and understand what it is you want and what the gaps are. But actually, long term, you're the kind of, as you say, focusing on using the best tools for the job in each case, and just accepting that you are going to have some divergence in the organization around who's using what, because it's just fit for purpose. And a really good example of that is, the whole kind of agile and DevOps approach, very much focused on giving teams the authority to make their own decisions about what's best for them. And so you absolutely might have a team using Terraform for deploying infrastructure, another team using CloudFormation because they're on AWS. And actually, you just got to kind of accept that you are going to have that proliferation. And it's not about trying to say, no, we are only going to use one tool. It is about pick the best in class, allow people to do that, particularly these days when there is so much flexibility. But think about where you need to have consistency and visibility over the top in order to make good decisions across those platforms.
I think that's right. It does play to having that sort of orchestrator of orchestrators over and above that, as you say, captures the hub of how all those individual specialist tools can be played in the best way to get the best result you want at the end of the day. And I think also, not only is there necessarily that there's a different tool sets in different parts of the org, that would normally be, hey, could we have to standardize on one, and maybe you don't, as you say. But do you think it's also about interchangeably being able to sort of replace some of these things with new best-in-class versions that are coming out to embrace innovation along the way?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of that, right? I think there, as we kind of talked about earlier, automation is not new. There are lots of kind of platforms that kind of certainly large organizations have had for a long time, and there's definitely a change of pace in terms of adopting and trying new things, and actually seeing where they are better and where they fit in. And as you kind of know, right, we're seeing some really kind of good examples where on one hand we're integrating with tools that have been around for 15 years, and but also in the same breath and actually in the same workflow, we're pulling in things for companies that didn't exist a couple of years ago but have become very prevalent, particularly in the DevOps world. And I think it's that mix and match approach, and being able to recognize that actually what you want is a really good end-to-end process that reduces the risk kind of by picking the best things at each point, but also allows you to have visibility over the top and step out to for people to intervene where they need to do that.
I think we're very close to running out of time, and I think you've said some number of great points that I've certainly taken from that, Marcus, and a very good discussion as usual. But I wondered if you had one or two things that you want to say you're excited about the future of this automation first culture that's sort of coming up and we're embracing. It does feel very dynamic. It's very exciting. The interoperability, the changing, the enabling people to really operate at pace. I wondered if there's one or two thoughts you wanted to share before we close.
I think probably the bit that's really interesting is, we've very much kind of worked for a good number of years in larger organizations, and had perhaps assumed that there was that newer organizations, so kind of unicorn type businesses, didn't suffer the same problems. And I think what's been really interesting is that fast growth companies kind of have different but parallel challenges. And so this is a really prevalent thing. It's not just a challenge for kind of big businesses that have been around for decades and decades. It's actually something that as soon as you have a good level of complexity and a good level of growth and change in your business, you're inevitably going to get to the point where you have some of these challenges. And I think the exciting bit is is kind of going on that journey with various clients around figuring out kind of how to find the common threads and take them between organizations and help solve that problem. For me, that's definitely the part that's exciting.
I couldn't agree more. I think these challenges are perennial. The challenges that as you scale and you want to move from being 10 people to 10,000, I think you need the right way to operate there. And even at 10, you still need to be building these things in a robust way that you're releasing well, you've got good resilience well, you're orchestrating amongst your teams because the customer world is more dynamic. Innovation, you want to be able to get a hold of it. And so I think you've summarized well how to approach that. So thank you very much, Marcus. And so that's a wrap for our session today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please feel free to make contact on social media, LinkedIn or others to ask any further questions. I'm sure we'll respond. It's at Cutover on Twitter, or we've got a LinkedIn page around Cutover, and we'd love to continue the dialogue. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.